courtroom air tasted like dust and despair. My suit, the one I'd bought for a wedding a decade ago, felt tight, suffocating. Every line of fabric seemed to press down on me, mirroring the crushing weight in my chest. Across the aisle, Sarah, my ex-wife, looked pristine. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her navy dress screamed respectable mother, and her eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now wide and watery, fixed on the judge. She was a master performer, always had been. Today, her performance felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. "He is a deadbeat dad, Your Honor," her lawyer boomed. "He has consistently failed to provide for his son. He has neglected his parental duties. He has caused untold emotional distress to both my client and young Ethan." Deadbeat. The word hung in the air, thick and ugly. It wasn't just an accusation. It felt like a brand, seared onto my skin for everyone to see. My lawyer, a tired man named Mr. Henderson, shifted uncomfortably beside me. He had tried to prepare me, to tell me how these things go, but nothing could prepare you for your entire life being dismantled, your character assassinated in a public forum. My eyes flickered to the judge. Her face was impassive, framed by silver hair, but her gaze was sharp, probing. I could feel her weighing the words, the accusations, judging me. And in that moment, I knew I was losing. I was already lost. "We have documented evidence, Your Honor," the lawyer continued, his voice dripping with righteous indignation, of countless missed payments, neglected visits, and a general disinterest in the welfare of his child. My client has been forced to shoulder the entire burden, financially and emotionally, of raising their son. Lies. All of it a twisted, distorted version of the truth, crafted to paint me as the villain. My hands clenched under the table, knuckles white. Missed payments? I'd worked myself to the bone, taken on extra shifts, skipped meals, just to make sure that money was there, even when my own life was falling apart. Neglected visits? Sarah was the one who consistently found excuses, who blocked my calls, who suddenly had Ethan busy every time I tried to arrange something. Disinterest? Ethan was my world, my entire reason for breathing. The thought of him believing any of this, of him thinking I didn't care, was more painful than any accusation thrown at me. I wanted to stand up, to scream the truth, to rip apart the carefully constructed facade of Sarah's victim. But I stayed silent, paralyzed by the enormity of the situation. Mr. Henderson had warned me against outbursts. "Let me do the talking, David," he'd said. But what if his talking wasn't enough? What if the truth, my truth, was too messy, too complex to be heard over Sarah's carefully rehearsed narrative? My mind reeled, flashing back to the last time I truly felt hope. It had been years ago, before the divorce, before Sarah changed, before the venom seeped into everything. Ethan was just a little kid then, maybe 7 or 8, and we were at the park. He was chasing pigeons, laughing, his bright eyes full of joy. I remembered thinking, this is it. This is what life is about. That memory felt like a lifetime ago, a dream I could never reclaim. Now, Ethan was almost 16. He wasn't here in the courtroom, thankfully. Sarah had made sure of that, claiming it would be too traumatic for him. But I knew the real reason. She didn't want him to hear my side. She didn't want him to see the truth, the pain in my eyes, the desperation. She wanted him to believe her version, the one where I was the monster, the one who abandoned them. A cold dread settled deep in my stomach. This wasn't just about money or custom. This was about my relationship with my son, about my identity as a father. If the court ruled against me, if I was officially branded a deadbeat, what would that mean for Ethan? Would he grow up believing his father didn't love him, didn't care enough to be there? The thought was unbearable. It was a knife twisting in a wound that would never heal. Your Honor, Sarah's lawyer concluded, his voice dropping to a somber, grave tone, we are simply asking the court to protect this child, to ensure he has the stable, supportive environment he deserves, free from the disruptions and neglect caused by his father. We request full custody, with no visitation rights, and ongoing financial support, commensurate with Mr. Miller's income. No visitation rights. The words hit me like a physical blow. That meant no Ethan. No birthdays, no holidays, no phone calls, no simple texts. It meant a complete erasure of me from his life. My breath hitched. My vision blurred. I couldn't imagine a life without my son. It was a punishment worse than death. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for my soul, a fight for the very essence of who I was. And I was losing. I was losing badly. All hope seemed to drain out of the room, leaving behind only the bitter taste of defeat. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time, long before the bitter courtroom drama, when Sarah and I were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. We met in college, young and full of dreams. She was vibrant, funny, and ambitious. I was a bit quieter, more grounded, but we clicked. We shared laughter, ambitions, and a belief that we could conquer the world together. When Ethan arrived, he was the center of our universe. Tiny bundle of joy that made everything else fade into the background. I remember holding him for the first time. His small hand gripping my finger. That was the moment I understood what unconditional love truly meant. I swore right then and there that I would always protect him, always be there for him, no matter what. Our marriage started to fray around Ethan's 5th birthday. It wasn't one big thing, but 1,000 tiny cuts. Sarah grew restless, wanted more from life than what we had. I tried to pick up the slack, to be the stable one, to ensure Ethan never felt the shift. I cooked, cleaned, did school runs, helped with homework. I became the primary parent. And I didn't mind. I loved it, but Sarah resented it. She started seeing my steady presence as a lack of ambition, my contentment with our home life as stagnation. Arguments became more frequent, sharper. The easy laughter disappeared, replaced by tense silences. The accusations started subtly at first. You are not doing enough. You are holding me back. Then the venom crept in. The divorce was messy, drawn out, and ugly. Sarah wanted everything. The house, the savings, a large chunk of my future earnings. I fought for fair terms, but more than anything, I fought for Eve. I wanted shared custody, equal time, to ensure he had both parents actively in his life. The court eventually granted Sarah primary physical custody, citing her more stable work schedule and the fact that she was the primary caregiver during our marriage's decline. I got every other weekend and 2 weeks in the summer. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was something. It was a lifeline. The child support payments were hefty, but I agreed without hesitation. My son deserved the best, and I would make sure he had it. I was working as a sales manager, a decent living, and I was confident I could manage. My priority was Ethan. Always Ethan. For the first few months after the divorce, things were manageable, if strained. I saw Ethan every other weekend. We went to the park, to the movies, built Lego castles, just like we used to. He seemed happy, adjusting. Sarah was cold, but mostly civil during drop-offs and pickups. But then, slowly, subtly, things began to change. Sarah's civility curdled into something colder, more manipulative. I'd call to speak to Ethan, and she'd say he was busy or asleep. I'd try to reschedule a weekend because of a work conflict, and she'd flat out refuse, saying I was unreliable. She started using Ethan as a weapon, a pawn in her ongoing war against me. I remember one particularly painful incident. It was Ethan's 10th birthday. I had planned a special day, a trip to the Natural History Museum, then his favorite pizza place, and finally, a big cake. I called Sarah a week in advance to confirm, and she was vague. The day before, I called again. No answer. I called her cell, her work, nothing. I went to her house. No one was home. I waited for hours, calling every few minutes, my heart sinking with each unanswered ring. Finally, a text came through, hours later. Ethan is with his cousins. We decided to do something else. Didn't you get my message? There was no message. I was heartbroken. Ethan's birthday, and I hadn't even seen him. I went to my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He told me it was a common tactic, parental alienation. He advised me to document everything, to keep trying, to not give Sarah any ammunition. He warned me that if I stopped trying, if I missed a payment, if I gave her any reason to accuse me, she would pounce. So I did. I documented every call, every text, every attempted visit. I kept every receipt for child support payments, meticulously filing them away. I bought Ethan gifts, even when I wasn't seeing him, and mailed them to Sarah's house, hoping he'd receive them. I sent him cards, little notes, anything to let him know I was thinking of him, that I loved him, that I hadn't forgotten him. The wall Sarah was building between us grew taller, thicker. I saw Ethan less and less. His phone, which I had paid for, was often off or out of battery when I called. When I did manage to talk to him, he sounded distant, almost guarded. It felt like I was losing him, piece by agonizing piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop. I was caught in a trap, constantly trying to prove my love, constantly being thwarted, constantly being painted as the one who didn't care. It was the most frustrating, soul-crushing experience of my life, and I knew deep down that this was all leading to a moment just like the one I was now enduring in that cold, sterile courtroom. The pattern became distressingly predictable. Every 2 weeks, I'd brace myself for the ritual of trying to see my son. I'd send a text to Sarah, polite and to the point. "Hi, Sarah. Checking in about Ethan for this weekend. What time works for pickup?" Sometimes she'd reply immediately with a curt, "He's busy." Other times, it would take hours or even a full day for a response to trickle in. And more often than not, the answer was a variation of no. "Ethan has a school project due." "Ethan has a friend's birthday party." "Ethan isn't feeling well." "Ethan has plans with my side of the family." The excuses piled up, a mountain of missed opportunities. Each one chipped away at my hope, at my spirit. I'd counter, politely, trying to find another time. Could I pick him up after the party? Maybe we could do dinner on Sunday instead. The answer was always the same, a firm, unyielding refusal. And always, always a subtle blame. "You should have asked sooner. Ethan needs stability, David, not your last-minute changes." It was never about me genuinely trying to accommodate. It was always framed as my failure to plan, my lack of commitment. I knew what she was doing. Parental alienation. Mr. Henderson had explained it in stark terms. She was slowly, systematically eroding my relationship with Ethan, turning him against me, making me seem like the absent, uncaring parent she claimed I was. It was psychological warfare, and my son was the battlefield. I kept trying. I documented every single attempt. My phone became a grim log of unanswered calls, ignored texts, and vague, dismissive replies from Sarah. I'd show up at her house sometimes, just to prove I was there, only to find no one home. Or worse, I'd see Ethan's bike in the driveway, hear muffled voices inside, and know they were home, but just ignoring. The sting of rejection, of being locked out of my son's life, was a constant ache. Financially, I continued to meet my obligations. Every child support payment was made on time, usually transferred electronically, so there was an irrefutable paper trail. I also kept buying Ethan clothes, books, even small toys, things I knew he'd like based on the dwindling conversations we had. I'd drop them off at Sarah's door with a note, hoping he'd receive them. I wanted him to know, no matter what, that I was thinking of him. But the emotional toll was immense. I felt like a ghost, a phantom father, always present in the background of Ethan's life, but never truly able to step into the foreground. I worried constantly. Was he happy? Was he doing well in school? Was he getting enough sleep, eating well? Were his friends good influences? Sarah never offered information, and when I asked, she'd snap. "He's fine, David. Don't you think I can raise my own son?" My few precious visits with Ethan became strained. He was growing up, of course, becoming a teenager, and teenagers naturally pull away from their parents. But this felt different. There was a distance in his eyes, a reluctance to engage. He'd often seemed distracted, checking his phone, earbuds in, lost in his own world. I tried not to take it personally, reminding myself that all teenagers do this. But with Ethan, it felt like he was deliberately putting up a barrier, a way to avoid any real conversation, any real connection. I often wondered if it was simply teenage angst, or if Sarah's constant narrative about me had finally taken root in his mind. Did he believe I didn't care? Did he resent me for things Sarah had told him? I tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing chasm between us. "Hey, buddy, everything okay at home? Or is your mom treating you all right?" He'd just shrug or say, "Yeah, Dad, everything's fine." He wouldn't make eye contact. It broke my heart a little more each time. I wondered what Sarah was telling him about me. Was she filling his head with lies? Was she telling him I didn't care, that I was too busy, too selfish? It felt like it. He never seemed excited to see me anymore, just resigned. One time, I was picking Ethan up from Sarah's house. I'd actually managed to get a full weekend, a rare victory. As I pulled up, I saw Ethan struggling with a heavy backpack. I got out to help him, and Sarah came out to the porch, arms crossed. "Oh, finally decided to show up, did we, David?" she sneered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "I told Ethan not to rely on you, you know. He almost missed his bus the other day because you forgot your pickup." This was a complete fabrication. I hadn't been scheduled for that pickup, and I'd never forgotten one. Ethan flinched. He looked at me, then down at his shoes. His face was a mask, unreadable. I wanted to yell at Sarah, to expose her lie right there. But I knew it would only make things worse for Ethan. Ethan just nodded, avoiding Sarah's glare, and hurried past her to my car. That moment stuck with me. The way Ethan flinched, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he seemed caught in the middle. It was clear Sarah's words had an effect. I was losing my son, not just to the distance Sarah created, but to the doubt she was sowing in his mind. The thought was a constant, gnawing worry. A heavy weight that never left me. I knew this constant battle, this slow burn of isolation, was going to lead to something catastrophic. I just didn't know how catastrophic or how soon. Just when I thought things couldn't get any harder, life decided to kick me while I was down. My job, which had been stable for years, hit a rough patch. The company underwent a major restructuring, and my sales territory was drastically cut. My income, which had always been enough to comfortably cover my child support obligations and living expenses, suddenly plummeted. It wasn't a total loss of income, but it was significant enough to cause serious stress. I immediately called Mr. Henderson. "Can we file for a modification?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "My income has dropped by nearly 30%. I can't maintain the current payments and keep a roof over my head." He listened patiently, then sighed. "We can try, David, but it's a lengthy process, and judges are often reluctant to reduce child support unless T here is a major long-term change, like a job loss or disability. And Sarah will fight it tooth and nail." He was right, she would. I tried to explain the situation to Sarah, hoping for a glimmer of understanding, a shred of empathy. I called her, sent her a detailed email outlining my reduced income and my commitment to still provide for Ethan, even if it meant making sacrifices. Her response was chillingly cold. "That sounds like your problem, David. My son's needs haven't changed, and neither should your obligations. If you can't manage, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to pay so much in the first place." She didn't care. She saw it as an opportunity. So I doubled down. I took on a second job, working evenings and weekends at a local hardware store. The hours were long. The work was physically draining, but it was income. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't what I'd envisioned for my life, but it allowed me to make those child support payments on time. Every time. I was exhausted, chronically underslept, and my personal life ceased to exist. My old car started making worrying noises, but I couldn't afford to fix it, let alone replace it. My apartment, once a comfortable place, started to feel like a prison, a place where I only went to sleep before starting another exhausting day. I was constantly teetering on the edge, one unexpected bill away from disaster. Sarah, of course, was oblivious, or pretended to be. She used my strained financial situation as further proof of my instability and unreliability. She would send me texts, usually late at night, taunting me. "Ethan needs new shoes. Are you going to pay for them? Or will he have to go without? Or His school trip is coming up. I suppose I'll have to cover that too. Since you are so struggling, each text was a jab, a reminder of my perceived failings, twisting the knife. I continued to meticulously document every payment, every penny I sent. I showed Mr. Henderson my bank statements, my pay stubs from both jobs, proving I was doing everything humanly possible to meet my obligations. But in court, emotional appeals often carry more weight than financial records. Sarah will paint herself as the struggling single mother, and you as the one who isn't pulling his weight. His words were a cold splash of reality. I knew Sarah would play the victim. She always did, and she was good at it. She would cry on cue, talk about her hardship, about the sacrifices she made. My struggle, my exhaustion, my second job, none of that would matter. It would all be spun as me being irresponsible or bad with money. The constant pressure started to affect my health. I lost weight. I was perpetually tired. My tempo was shorter, though I tried to never let it show around Ethan. In the rare moments I actually got to see him, I felt like I was constantly running a race, but the finish line kept moving further away, and the prize was simply to not lose my son completely. The visits with Ethan became even more precious, more tinged with sadness. I couldn't afford to take him to expensive places anymore. We'd go to the local park, or the free community pool, or just hang out at my small apartment, watching movies. I tried to make up for the lack of material things with my presence, my attention, my love. But I always felt the invisible wall Sarah had built between us. He was quiet, subdued. He rarely initiated conversation. He never asked about my financial struggles, which made me wonder if Sarah had told him, painting me as a failure. The fear of falling behind on child support was a suffocating blanket. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, imagining the consequences, wage garnishment, contempt of court, and ultimately losing my son for good. That was the ultimate terror. It drove me to work longer, harder, to push myself past exhaustion. I wouldn't be a deadbeat dad. Not ever. I would fight with every fiber of my being to prove it. But the more I fought, the more Sarah seemed to escalate her tactics, tightening the noose around my neck. I felt like a drowning man, desperately grasping for air, with no one to throw me a lifeline. Ethan was a teenager now, a whirlwind of lanky limbs and shifting moods. He was nearly 16, and the sweet, outgoing boy I remembered was slowly being overshadowed by a quiet, withdrawn young man. During the sporadic weekends I managed to get with him, I tried desperately to connect. I'd ask about school, about his friends, about his interests. His answers were usually monosyllabic. Fine. Okay. Nothing much. He spent a lot of time on his phone, earbuds in, lost in his own world. I tried not to take it personally, reminding myself that all teenagers do this. But with Ethan, it felt different. It felt like he was deliberately putting up a barrier. I often wondered if it was simply teenage angst, or if Sarah's constant narrative about me had finally taken root in his mind. Did he believe I didn't care? Did he resent me for things Sarah had told him? I tried to break through. I'd talk about memories from his childhood, funny stories from when he was little. Sometimes a flicker of a smile would cross his face, a momentary softening of his guarded expression. Those moments were like rare treasures, giving me just enough hope to keep fighting. One weekend, I suggested we go fishing, something we used to love doing together when he was younger. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, Dad, if you want." His voice lacked any enthusiasm. We went. The silence in the small boat was deafening, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the hull. I tried to talk, but he just stared at the water, his line still. He didn't catch anything, and neither did I. Trip felt less like a bonding experience and more like a forced interaction. "Is everything okay, Ethan?" I asked, finally, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "You seem a little down." He shrugged, still not looking at me. "I'm fine, Dad. You know you can tell me anything, right? No matter what it is." He finally turned, his eyes briefly meeting mine. There was something in them, a fleeting mix of sadness and resentment, but it vanished quickly. "Yeah, I know. It's just Mom says you are always busy. That's why you don't come around much. Or that you don't call." My heart clenched. This was it, the direct impact of Sarah's manipulation. "Ethan, that's not true," I said, my voice rising slightly. Then I quickly reined it in. "I call you every day. I try to see you every weekend. Your mom, she sometimes says you are busy, or she doesn't pick up the phone. I promise you, I try. Always." He looked away again, focused on his fishing line. "Yeah," he muttered. "She says you say that. It was a wall, a thick, impenetrable wall." Sarah had coached him well. She had planted doubt, nurtured it, and now it was blooming into a full-blown barrier between us. He was a teenager now, old enough to understand nuance, but still young enough to be influenced by the parent he lived with every day. And Sarah had him in her grasp. Later that weekend, when I dropped him off at Sarah's house, an argument erupted. It started over something trivial, a misunderstanding about his pickup time for a school event. Sarah, as usual, blew it out of proportion, making it sound like I was deliberately inconveniencing her. "Honestly, David," she fumed, standing on the porch, her voice shrill, "you are so unreliable. You always make things so difficult. It's no wonder Ethan barely wants to see you anymore." Ethan was standing right there, just inside the doorway, listening. His eyes were wide, fixed on his mother, then on me. "That's not fair, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but my hands were trembling. I am here right on time, and I try to see Ethan every chance I get. You are the one who blocks my calls and invents excuses. Oh, please, she scoffed, a sneer twisting her features. You expect me to believe that, after all the times you've forgotten to pay or missed a visit. Ethan knows the truth. Don't you, sweetie? She turned to him, her voice sickeningly sweet, a stark contrast to the venom she'd just spat at me. Ethan's eyes darted from her to me, then to the floor. He didn't say a word, just stood there, shoulders hunched, looking utterly miserable. In that moment, I saw the true cost of Sarah's war. It wasn't just destroying me. It was destroying our son. It was forcing him to choose, to live in a world of lies, and he was suffering because of it. I left that day with a profound sense of despair. Sarah had not only successfully painted me as the villain, but she had managed to make Ethan a reluctant participant in her narrative. He was no longer just hearing the lies. He was living them, being influenced by them, and it was crushing his spirit. I knew then that the fight in court wasn't just about my reputation or my money. It was about rescuing my son from a life of deception, about showing him the truth before it was too late. It was about rescuing. It was a tears nail white trouble. But how do you prove something when the very person you are trying to reach is caught in a web of lies? The answer felt impossible. The official papers arrived 2 weeks later, thick and heavy, like a death warrant. Sarah had formally filed for sole custody, requesting the court to terminate my visitation rights completely and to increase child support payments, citing my chronic neglect and failure to provide a stable presence. Fabricated timelines of missed payments, conveniently omitting the weeks I'd been working 2 jobs to make sure every penny was there. Distorted accounts of missed visits, twisting my attempts to reschedule into evidence of my indifference. Screenshots of old emails, taken out of context, painting me as angry or uncooperative. My blood ran cold as I read through it all. She had compiled a case so comprehensive, so devious, that it would be incredibly difficult to dismantle. Her lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man, had done his job well, constructing a narrative of me as an irresponsible, unreliable deadbeat. I called Mr. Henderson immediately. "This is insane," I choked out, my voice raw with disbelief. "All lies. Half of these missed payments are when my bank had a processing delay, and the visits, she was the one refusing them." Mr. Henderson listened calmly, his voice a steadying presence. "I know, David. This is what they do. They create a mountain of evidence, hoping the sheer volume will convince the judge, regardless of the truth. We need to go through every single point, refute it, and present our own evidence." My evidence felt pitiful in comparison. My meticulously kept records of child support payments were just bank statements and transfer confirmations. My log of attempted calls and texts was a simple spreadsheet, listing dates and times, often followed by a grin no answer, or Sarah replied, Ethan busy. How could a few lines of data stand up against Sarah's narrative of emotional distress and years of alleged neglect? Over the next few weeks, my life became a blur of legal preparation. Mr. Henderson and I spent hours, days meticulously going through every single accusation. Accusation 1, missed child support payments. Sarah claimed I had missed 6 payments over the past 2 years, causing her extreme financial hardship. My evidence, bank statements clearly showing every payment made on time, often days in advance. For the 2 payments she highlighted as missed, I had proof from my bank of a temporary processing issue that was resolved within 24 hours and the funds had cleared. Accusation 2. Failure to provide for Ethan's needs. Sarah submitted receipts for clothing, school supplies, and medical bills, claiming she alone had covered these. My evidence, receipts for clothes and school supplies I had bought and sent to Ethan, often dropped off at her house. Proof of medical insurance payments I still carried for Ethan, and reimbursements sent directly to Sarah. Accusation 3. Neglecting visitation right. Sarah cited numerous instances where I allegedly failed to show up or cancel last minute. My evidence, my phone record showing calls and texts to Sarah, attempting to confirm visits, often met with no response or a flat Ethan is busy. Specific dates where I showed up at a house only to find no one home. Enkse's asking for alternative dates, which were always refused. The sheer audacity of her lies was staggering. She didn't just exaggerate, she completely fabricated events. She claimed I had never bought Ethan a birthday present for his last 3 birthdays, when I had clear receipts and even photos of the gifts before I sent them. She claimed I never called Ethan when my call log on my phone was filled with daily attempts to reach him, almost always ending in voicemail. The most damning accusations, however, were those that touched on Ethan's emotional well-being. Sarah claimed that Ethan was showing signs of anxiety and depression due to my inconsistent and unreliable presence. She attached a letter from a therapist, which stated that Ethan was indeed struggling, but carefully avoided directly blaming me, instead focusing on family conflict as the cause. Sarah, however, interpreted this for the court as direct proof of my harmful influence. I felt a cold rage. She was using our son's very real struggles, twisting them to destroy me. How could she be so cruel? My only solace was the quiet strength of Mr. Henderson. He kept saying, "The truth will come out, David, we just need to present it clearly." But my truth felt so small, so easily dismissed, against Sarah's elaborate tapestry of lies. The pre-trial hearing was set. The date loomed like a thundercloud. I spent every waking hour consumed by the fear of losing Ethan, of being officially branded a deadbeat. Practiced my testimony, trying to keep my voice steady, to convey my genuine love for my son, my desperation to be a part of his life. But every time I imagined facing Sarah, her smug smile, her feigned tears, my resolve wavered. I knew this wasn't just about the facts anymore. It was about who the judge believed, who told the more convincing story. And Sarah, with her victim act and her mountain of carefully constructed lies, was a formidable opponent. I felt like I was walking into a firing squad, unarmed, with only my broken heart as my shield. The day of the trial finally arrived, bringing with it a profound sense of dread. The day was here. Air in the courtroom was thick, heavy with anticipation. I sat at the defense table, my stomach churning with nerve. Mr. Henderson was beside me, his notes spread out, looking over them one last time. Across the room, Sarah sat, radiating an aura of calm, almost serene confidence. She gave me a brief, cold glance, then looked away. The judge entered and everyone rose. Her presence was imposing, her expression unreadable. This was it. The moment my future and my relationship with Ethan would be decided. Sarah's lawyer, Mr. Davies, stood for his opening statement. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and spoke with a practiced dramatic cadence. "Your Honor," he began, his voice resonating through the room. "Today we are here to ensure the well-being of a child caught in a difficult situation. A child who, despite the best efforts of his dedicated mother, has suffered due to the prolonged and consistent neglect of his father, Mr. David Miller." My jaw clenched. Here we go. "For years," Mr. Davies continued, pacing slowly before the judge, "Mr. Miller has demonstrated a blatant disregard for his son's emotional and financial needs. He has missed countless child support payments, forcing my client, Miss Sarah Jenkins, to bear the sole financial burden of raising their son Ethan. This despite Mr. Miller earning a substantial income. A substantial income? I wanted to laugh or cry. He clearly had no idea about my second job, my constant struggle just to keep my head above water. He has routinely failed to show up for scheduled visitations, cancelling last minute, or simply not appearing, leaving his son heartbroken and confused. He has chosen his own convenience over his son's need for a consistent, loving presence. Miss Jenkins, on the other hand, has been a pillar of strength and stability for Ethan, sacrificing her own career ambitions to ensure his welfare. He spun a narrative so far from the truth it was dizzying. Sarah, sacrificing her career? She was the one who worked long hours, who put her ambition above our family when we were married. I was the one who sacrificed, who became the primary caregiver, who then took on 2 jobs to make sure Ethan was taken care of. We will present evidence today, Your Honor, Mr. Davies continued, his voice becoming more solemn. That shows a clear pattern of neglect, of broken promises, and of a father who, quite frankly, abandoned his responsibilities. We will show you documented financial discrepancies, a litany of missed visitations, and the emotional toll this has taken on young Ethan through expert testimony. Paused, letting his words sink in, then delivered his final crushing blow. Our request is simple, Your Honor. We ask that the court grant Miss Jenkins full legal and physical custody of Ethan, ensuring his stability. We also ask that Mr. Miller's visitation rights be terminated for the child's emotional protection, and that he be held accountable for the financial obligations he has so egregiously failed to meet. No visitation rights. The words echoed in my head, a death knell for my relationship with my son. I felt a wave of nausea. His opening statement was powerful, convincing, filled with emotional language designed to sway the judge. Mr. Davies sat down, a smug smile barely concealed on his face. Then it was Mr. Henderson's turn. He stood a little hunched, looking even more tired than usual. Your Honor, he began, his voice lacking the booming confidence of Mr. Davies. My client, Mr. David Miller, is a loving and dedicated father. He has consistently strived to be a part of his son's life, and he has always honored his financial obligation. He spoke about my efforts, about the challenges I faced, about my deep love for Ethan. He mentioned my second job, my financial struggle. But his words fell flat, lacking the emotional punch of Mr. Davies's performance. He wasn't able to counter the specific accusations with the detail that was needed in an opening statement. He focused on my character, on my intentions, but he didn't have the specific rebuttals ready at this stage to directly challenge Sarah's carefully constructed narrative. We will show, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson concluded, that Mr. Miller has been actively prevented from seeing his son, that he has been diligent in his payments, and that he is a fit and capable parent who deserves to maintain a relationship with his child. He sat down and I felt a wave of despair. It wasn't enough. His statement, while true, felt weak, defensive, almost apologetic. It lacked the fire, the conviction, the damning evidence that Mr. Davies had promised. The judge, still impassive, looked from me to Sarah, then back to her notes. I could feel her weighing the scales, and in my gut, I knew they were tipping heavily in Sarah's favor. The battle had begun, and I was already losing. My heart sank heavy as a stone. The prosecution calls Miss Sarah Jenkins to the stand. Sarah rose, a vision of composure, and glided to the witness stand. She took the oath, her voice clear and steady. She looked directly at the judge, her eyes wide, almost innocent. It was a masterful performance. Mr. Davies began his questioning, leading her gently through her narrative. Miss Jenkins, can you describe Mr. Miller's involvement in Ethan's life since the divorce? Sarah sighed, a delicate pained sound. It's been incredibly difficult, Your Honor. David, he just wasn't present. He would promise to call, promise to visit, and then nothing. Ethan would sit by the phone, waiting, and he'd just be heartbroken when his father never showed up. My hands clenched under the table. She was lying, outright lying. My call logs, my texts, my desperate attempts to reach Ethan, none of that was being heard. And financially, Miss Jenkins? Mr. Davies continued, his voice sympathetic. Oh, the financial strain has been immense, Sarah said, her voice wavering slightly. David would often miss child support payments. Sometimes for weeks. I had to choose between paying bills and buying food for Ethan. There were times I honestly didn't know how we would make it. I had to take on extra shifts, rely on the kindness of family. Ethan knew the struggle. He'd ask Mommy, why isn't Daddy sending money? It was heartbreaking. A single tear tracked down her cheek, perfectly timed. I wanted to scream. Every single payment was made, every single one. On time. How could she stand there and fabricate such cruel lies? Did Mr. Miller ever communicate with you about financial difficulties or attempts to modify child support? No, Your Honor, not truly. He would occasionally send vague emails claiming things were tight, but he never initiated any formal process. He just expected me to pick up his slack. He never seemed to understand the impact on Ethan. Mr. Henderson leaned over to me. "Stay calm, David," he whispered. "We'll get her on cross-examination." But doubt was creeping in. Sarah was so convinced. Her voice was soft, her eyes sincere, her every gesture radiating the pain of a wronged mother. Even I, who knew the truth, almost found myself believing her. Mr. Davies then shifted to the visitation issue. "Miss Jenkins, can you recall an instance where Mr. Miller failed to show for a scheduled visitation?" "Oh, so many times," she said, shaking her head sadly. "There was Ethan's 10th birthday, for example." David promised to take him to the museum. "Ethan was so excited he waited all morning, dressed and ready. David never came, never even called to cancel. Ethan was devastated. My frantic calls, my desperate trip to her house, finding no one home. Her text message hours later saying they'd done something else. She was twisting it into a complete inversion of the truth." "And how did Ethan react to these consistent disappointments?" "He became withdrawn, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "He stopped asking about his father. He'd just say, 'Dad's busy, Mom.' He doesn't really care. It broke my heart to see my son suffer like that. He's always been such a sensitive child." She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She then talked about Ethan's anxiety, the therapist visits, the emotional distress he was supposedly enduring because of my absence. She painted a picture of a child abandoned, a mother struggling against insurmountable odds, all caused by my supposed neglect. When Mr. Davies concluded his direct examination, Sarah sat back, looking exhausted but validated. The judge's expression, while still largely neutral, seemed to soften towards Sarah. Could almost hear the verdict forming in her mind, guilty. Then it was Mr. Henderson's turn for cross-examination. He started slowly, trying to chip away at her carefully constructed facade. He asked about the specific dates of missed payments, referencing my bank statement. "Miss Jenkins, you testified that Mr. Miller missed a payment on March 15th of last year. Can you explain this bank statement, which clearly shows a transfer from Mr. Miller to your account on March 14th? Sarah blinked. "Oh, that was a late payment, I believe, or perhaps it was for something else. It was very confusing," she fumbled, clearly flustered. Mr. Henderson pressed on, but Sarah was skilled at deflection. She'd say, "I don't recall," or "it was so long ago," or "the emotional toll was just too great to keep track of every detail." She avoided direct answers, always returning to her narrative of suffering and my supposed failings. He then moved to the missed visit. "Miss Jenkins, Mr. Miller's phone records show dozens of calls to your number on the dates you claim he failed to show up. Why were these calls not answered?" "I was busy, Your Honor," she said, defensively. "Or Ethan was asleep. Or perhaps I just didn't see the phone. David has a habit of calling at inconvenient times. It was a stalemate." My lawyer had the facts, the hard evidence, but Sarah had the performance, the emotional appeal, and a talent for dodging direct questions. She was a master manipulator, and she was winning. As Mr. Henderson sat down defeated, I felt a profound sense of hopelessness. The judge looked ready to make a decision. My entire life, my connection to my son, was about to be severed. The world felt like it was closing in, dark and cold. There was nothing more I could do. Nothing. Just as Mr. Henderson finished and the judge prepared to speak, a small commotion stirred in the back of the courtroom. My head snapped up. It was Ethan. He stood hesitantly, looking young and slender in a pressed shirt, his backpack clutched in his hand. Sarah gasped, a small choked sound. She had forbidden him from coming, claimed it would be too much for him. Her face went pale, a mixture of shock and fury. Ethan took a deep breath, then walked forward, his eyes scanning the room until they met mine. There was something in them I hadn't seen in years. A quiet determination, a glint of the bright, inquisitive boy he used to be. My heart leaped, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. He approached the bar, then paused before the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling slightly but surprisingly clear. "My name is Ethan Miller." The judge, clearly surprised, raised an eyebrow. "And why are you here, young man?" she asked, her voice softer than it had been all day. I heard what was being said." Ethan began, glancing briefly at Sarah, whose face was now a mask of panic. "About my dad. About how he never cared, how he missed payments and visits." He paused, taking another breath. "It's not true, Your Honor." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Sarah's lawyer immediately jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. The child is not a witness and is being improperly influenced." "Silence!" the judge commanded, her voice sharp. He has approached the bench and stated he has something relevant to share, Mr. Miller continued. Ethan looked at me again, a flash of something like defiance in his eyes. Then he turned back to the judge. My mom, she claimed my dad was a deadbeat dad. She said he didn't call. She said he never tried to see me. She said he didn't send money for me. He reached into his backpack, pulling out his phone. He held it up. But these messages, Your Honor, they tell a different story. Sarah let out a small shriek. Ethan, no, what are you doing? Silence, Miss Jenkins, the judge snapped, her eyes narrowing. Continue, Mr. Miller. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he navigated his phone. My mom always told me my dad never called. But I saw his calls come in on this phone he bought me. She just made me ignore them. Look. He held the phone up, showing the call log to the bailiff, who then handed it to the judge. The screen clearly showed dozens of incoming calls from Dad that had gone unanswered. She also told me he never showed up for visits. Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength. But he would text her, and she would tell him I was busy or sick. She would tell me to hide in my room if he came to the door. She even coached me on what to say if he ever asked me something. He then pulled up a series of text messages. These are from my mom, he said. Last year, when my dad was trying to take me to the Natural History Museum for my birthday. The judge leaned forward, reading the screen intently. The messages scrolled. Sarah, don't answer your dad's calls. We have other plans, Ethan, but he said we were going to the museum. Sarah, he's lying. He always cancels. Just ignore him. If he shows up, tell him you are sick and need to sleep, Sarah. Remember, if the judge asks, Daddy never calls you. He's too busy with his new job. He doesn't care. More messages followed. Instructions to ignore my texts, to pretend I hadn't sent gifts, to never bring up the conversations we did have. Mates where Sarah explicitly told him to tell me he was busy or had plans, when he was just sitting at home. Even messages telling him what to say if anyone asked about my financial contributions, painting me as neglect. Courtroom was silent except for the quiet click of the judge's pen as she made notes. Sarah sat frozen, her face ashen, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. Her lawyer looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Ethan looked at his mom, then back at the judge. My dad always tried, Your Honor. He always sent me gifts, even when Mom told me he didn't. He called me every day. He came to the house. Mom she didn't want him to be my dad anymore. She wanted me to believe he was a bad person, but he's not. He then pulled up another string of texts. These were recent. Sarah, remember what we talked about for court? You barely see your dad. He doesn't help with money. He's unreliable. Ethan, Mom, that's not true. He always pays, and he tries to see me. You just don't let him. Sarah, don't talk back to me, Ethan. This is for your own good. Just say what I told you, or do you want us to lose everything? The judge finished reading. She slowly handed the phone back to Ethan, her face now a mix of anger and profound disappointment. She looked at Sarah, then at Mr. Davies, then finally her gaze rested on me. My eyes were stinging with unshed tears. Tears of sorrow for what Ethan had endured, but also tears of overwhelming love and pride for my brave, brave son. He had done it. He had shown the truth. My son, my strong, truthful son had saved me. The judge's gavel cracked down, the sound sharp and final in the stunned silence of the court. Miss Jenkins, she said, her voice laced with an icy fury I hadn't heard before. The evidence presented by your son, Mr. Ethan Miller, is deeply disturbing. It suggests a calculated and malicious attempt to obstruct this court and to alienate a child from his loving parent. This constitutes not only contempt of court, but raises serious questions about your fitness as a primary caregiver. Sarah's face crumpled. She started to babble, Your Honor, he's just a child. He doesn't understand. David has poisoned his mind. Silence, Miss Jenkins, the judge thundered. I have seen the texts. They are irrefutable. They clearly demonstrate your attempts to manipulate your son, to actively prevent Mr. Miller from exercising his visitation rights, and to fabricate a narrative of neglect for this court. She turned to Mr. Davies, Sarah's lawyer. Counsel, I suggest you advise your client that she may be facing charges of perjury and parental interference. This court takes such egregious behavior very seriously. Mr. Davies stood pale and speechless. Then the judge turned to me, a flicker of something like compassion in her eye. Mr. Miller, she said, the court finds in your favor. Based on the overwhelming evidence, particularly the brave testimony of your son, it is clear that you have been a diligent and loving father, consistently striving to meet your obligations and maintain a relationship with Ethan. Despite Miss Jenkins's deliberate efforts to prevent, a wave of dizzying relief washed over me. I gasped, tears finally spilling down my face. Effective immediately, the judge continued. The existing custody order is hereby reversed. Full legal and physical custody of Ethan Miller is granted to Mr. David Miller. Miss Jenkins will be granted supervised visitation, subject to further review by this court, and therapeutic recommendations. Furthermore, Miss Jenkins will be responsible for all existing and future child support payments to Mr. Miller until Ethan reaches the age of 18. The gavel came down again, sealing my fate. But this time it was the sound of justice, of liberation. Sarah let out a wail, her composure completely shattered. Her lawyer quickly pulled her out of the courtroom, her sobs echoing in the hallway. I couldn't move. I just stared at Ethan, who was standing there watching me, a faint smile on his face, tears shining in his own eyes. I walked over to him slowly, as if in a dream. When I reached him, I knelt down, even though he was nearly as tall as I was. "Ethan," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "My boy, thank you. Thank you." He threw his arms around me, hugging me tightly, something he hadn't done in years. His embrace felt like coming home. "Couldn't let her do it, Dad," he whispered, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I heard everything. I saw how sad you were. I couldn't lie anymore. I know you love me, I always did, deep down, even when she tried to make me think other." We stood there for a long moment, just holding on to each other. The weight of years of separation, of lies, of pain, finally lifting. Mr. Henderson approached, a genuine smile on his face. "You have a very brave son, Dave." "He's my hero," I said, pulling back to look at Ethan, my heart overflowing with love and pride. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Ethan moved in with me that very day. His room, which had been mostly empty, quickly filled with his things. It was a strange adjustment at first for both of us. He was used to his mother's rules, her way of life. But slowly, tentatively, we began to build our new normal. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Ethan told me about the things Sarah had told him, the manipulation, the emotional pressure. It hurt to hear, but it also helped me understand why he had been so distant. He also told me how he had secretly saved all those messages, knowing deep down that one day he might need them. He couldn't stand the lies anymore. He missed his dad. Sarah was indeed charged, though I chose not to press further beyond what the court decided. Child support she now owed me was a stark reversal of fortune, a symbolic victory more than a financial necessity, as I was working hard to rebuild my career and my life. Her supervised visits with Ethan were awkward, tense, and infrequent. Ethan didn't want to go often, and I didn't push him. He needed time to heal, to find his own truth. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were still challenges, still memories of the dark years. But now I had Ethan by my side. We went fishing again, and this time we talked and laughed. We cooked meals together, watched movies, and just enjoyed being a family again. He started opening up about school, about his friends, about his dream. He even started calling me Dad again instead of just Dave. The accusation of being a deadbeat dad, once a burning brand, now felt like a distant nightmare. My name had been cleared, my reputation restored, but more importantly, my son was back. His courage, his unwavering love had brought us back together. He showed the world the truth, and in doing so, he gave me back my life. It was a long, painful journey, but in the end, love and the truth prevailed. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was the luckiest father in the world.